everybody, and a very warm welcome back to the latest episode of Hidden Jewels of Soul and Disco. This week's episode will be a little different from the episodes you are used to watch. It was also the episode that took me the longest to make, but for me it was very, very important to include some certain aspects. And I wanted to do this because a couple of weeks ago I got an email from Frederick out of Italy, and I asked him if he's okay if I mention some portions of his email and if it's okay if I mention his name, and he was totally fine with it. Because after our little exchange, I wanted to point out aspects which I think are so important to get an overall understanding of the time back then when people growed up, and especially the artists who growed up, to understand their environment, that I included this in this episode. And he asked me, for example, why so many artists end up in addiction, poetry, depression, or even worse. And why did they sign contracts from, locally labels instead of major labels if they would have talent? Why is that not possible? And also, why do they end up in a situation where they had a million seller, but were not getting any money out of this? So, Frederick, first of all, thank you so much for asking this and for making it for me possible to get an opportunity to point this out. So, therefore, in this week's episode, we are featuring the great Ann Garrett. Usually at that point, you would hear some needle drops, but like I said in the beginning, today it's a little different because I want to go into the history of Ann. With many artists I've showed you on this channel before, the history is almost the same. The environment is almost the same. What changes are names, city names, school names, but most of the time the story is the same. Concerning Ann, there is not many information available, but the information we have is kind of detailed. So, Ann Garrett was born on March the 3rd in 1949 in Chicago. She grew up near Maxwell Street. Maxwell Street was a vibrant street. It had a kind of flea market atmosphere, but most of all, it was famous for people who sang the blues on that street. Attended the Carter Henry Harrison Technical High School, and it was a high school which you were in for 4 years. The school started in 1912 and operated till 1983. Now let's make a little break from Ann and get back to history, to the general history at that time. Now we are into November the 14th in 1960. Ann was at that time 11 years old. Well, at that time in Louisiana, Ruby Bridges, who was 6 years old, attended at the first African American pupil a school which was considered only for white people. She was 6 at that time in 1960. So you can imagine in what kind of environment these people grew up. They were not even second-class people. And Ruby, with 6 years old, was threatened from a woman to be poisoned, or other classmates made a little doll which was African-American and put it in a coffin. And a 6-year-old was faced with these kind of situations. Sammy Davis Jr., also a very famous example, was not getting the same treatment as other members of the Rat Pack. Well, that changed when Frank Sinatra stepped up for him. In 1970, Elvis was planned to do a concert in Houston, Texas, in Houston Astrodome. And people said, hey, Elvis, you're totally welcome to come, but those black female singers you're having, we don't want them here. Elvis said, if they're not welcome to come, I won't come either. And this was the Sweet Inspirations. The Sweet Inspirations was at that time considered one of the best backing groups, and they had a very successful career of their own. So you can imagine what kind of environment African American people were faced with at that time. But let's get back to Joanne. Well, Joanne moved in the mid-60s to the Robert Taylor homes in Bronzeville. Well, those homes were planned or constructed in 1960, were finished in 1962. And these homes were called the projects. And those kind of projects were done all over America. But in Chicago, this one was the biggest. And what they've done is, around Chicago, there was a so-called Black Belt, or other people called it the slums, where most of the African American people lived in, because they weren't, of course, not paid the same way, they were not getting the same jobs. Like I said, they were not even second-class people, so they lived there and they called these places their home. And the city thought, well, we need to do something against this and all these kind of things, so they planned to do these projects. And they needed space to build this project. So what happened was they tore people's homes down to have the place, so they kind of eliminated the Black Belt and built these homes. If this was such a good idea, well, history turned out not, because also these houses were demolished. And usually, or in the beginning, these homes were built for a combined population of 11,000 people. By 1965, at the height of these projects, in Chicago lived 27,000 people in rooms which were built for 11,000 people. So you can imagine that this situation wasn't turned out well, or did not turn out well. I found a news report from 1964 where a woman is discussing the situation she is living in. And this footage might have taken around the same time when Joanne moved in there with her parents and her 7 brothers. So let's have a listen or look at this news report.
Earlene White is a Chicago housewife, mother of 6 children. Before urban renewal, she lived in a slum. Now she inhabits a new world, a world of concrete and glass. It is clean and free of rats. Her new home has heat in the winter and rows of open galleries to catch the summer breeze. Like many other residents of Robert Taylor homes, Mrs. White knows that the project is, physically, a vast improvement over the slums. Yet, like other tenants, she feels that within the project's great high-rise buildings, she is struggling with a new enemy.
Anyone that is passing a high-rise project and looking in from the outside, it seems like a beautiful home, a clean home, and a lovely place to live in. But I live inside of a high-rise in Chicago, and I know the atmosphere that I am living in. There's so many people in the high-rise, and there are 10 families to a floor. There are 154 to 56 families to one building. To each family, there are from 2 to 10 children. You go out to get groceries, you come up on the elevator, you have to wait 10, 15, 20 minutes before you can get it. The with this many people's around, when the mornings you wake up, there's children up and down the gallery with the noise, knocking on your door, a couple neighbors arguing on the gallery. At night when you go to bed, it's the same thing. You feel that there's too many families involved, too many faces that you see. You can't go in or out of the building unless you're looking into many faces. You can't go to the chute to empty your garbage unless there's a million faces in front of you. And I wonder, who are my children playing with? Who are their friends? I wonder if I can raise my boys and girls here, and they can turn out to be the type of children and young men and ladies that I have always dreamed and hoped and prayed for them to be. You can't hang your pictures like you want to. The walls are rough. You still can't paint them what you want to paint them. Someone would think that living in a high-rise building with as many family that is involved, that you wouldn't be lonely. But I feel living in a high-rise building like this, that you are very much lonely. It makes me feel as if this is not my home. This is only a place where I sleep and pay my rent. It's just like you're closed in a corner with no way out, nowhere to go.
The chairman of the Housing Authority is Charles Swibel.
We at the Chicago Housing Authority have interpreted the rules and regulations in regard to public housing to mean that we are to provide safe, decent and sanitary housing, which means good housing, but not luxurious housing. Some of the individual complaints that I, as well as the people on the outside, have heard about the residents not being able to paint walls, not being able to hang pictures on the walls, are a slight over-exaggeration. We do give our tenants now a choice of 5 colors. This is an evolution. You must remember that these people have come out of slums. They have brought with them some of the slum-bred ideas, some of the slum-bred hostilities. In regard to hanging a picture on the wall, all we ask of them is that they notify the manager so we can give them the proper hook. We don't want to make it so comfortable and so ideal for them that they wish to remain in public housing. We are trying to get them upgraded, if you will, so that they can go out on the open market and find private housing. If I had a choice of living at Robert Taylor Homes or in a dilapidated shack, I would choose Robert Taylor Homes.
When I visit my mother in what some people may call a slum area, I feel this is home. Not because it's my mother's home, but it's because I feel free. I've left behind me the noise. I left behind me the hundreds of children. I left behind me these stone walls closed in on you. When I go there, I can sit on the porch, or my kids can go in the yard and play. I can open a door and walk out and say, don't do this, or come inside and eat. These little small things is really what matters.
3, 4.
We do want them to better themselves. That is the sole purpose of the public housing program. We want their morale to go up. We hope and pray that they can merely use public housing for an economic reason and that they will better themselves, get better jobs, make more money, and go into the private market. We are not in competition with the private market.
Well, you can choose 5 colors if you want to. Isn't that great? Well, the first time I saw this, I got a little sick about the way these people were treated. Hey, it's out of rats. What do you want? You have, it's clean. What do you want? Now you want to hang up pictures to make it more like your home? Oh, come on. So you've grown up in this environment. So you can say, hey, it's clean, everything, all right. But what happened later on is, and even at that time it started in 1964 to 1965, well, maintenance costs or money was cut down. So if an elevator was broken, it kept on being broken. If glass was broken, if anything wasn't working well, it wasn't really taken care of. And now you can imagine more people coming in, no maintenance being done. Well, you guess yourself. It wasn't really an environment where people loved to live. gangs came up. There wasn't a grocery store nearby, so the delivery of groceries was difficult. A police station was not nearby, so till the police came up to what they called, for the African American people in the garbage living there to say the worst, oh, we don't come up there. So you can imagine what happened to these people who lived in this project. Let's get back to Joanne. Once Joanne finished high school, she went to the DuSable High. And this school was absolutely famous for their music department. And this was under the leadership of Captain Walter Diet. And he's such a legend in Chicago that even after decades, he died, and he retired in 1966. And he passed away in 1969, but still up to this day, tribute concerts are being held for Mr. Diet.
The concert honored famed Chicago jazz musician Captain Walter Diet, who died 20 years ago. Diet taught Chicago musicians for 30 years before retiring, and the musicians performing today represented 3 decades of DuSable graduates, with one going all the way back to the class of '39. They all say they got a great deal from Captain Diet and DuSable, and today they gave back a little.
At that time, Ruby was around 15 years old. And Mr. Diet, who had students like Nat King Cole or Dinah Washington, he loved her voice. And he really helped her to work with her voice. At that same time, a classmate from Joanne also had an ear for voice, and he encouraged her to audition. And this classmate was Cormy Vance, and he sang in a vocal group which was called Paramounts, and they released 2 singles in 1967. The audition Joanne was going to hold was for no other than Chicago DJ and club owner legend Purvis Spann. And he was a DJ at WVON. And he heard Joanne and he said, wow, you sound great. But we need to see how the audience reaction is, how all this works. So he did quite a professional move because he absolutely knew his business. If you look him up, he's, like I said, a legend. He was the one who crowned Aretha Franklin as Queen of Soul. And he helped a lot of artists who are now mega and superstars to get their first steps in music business. He passed away a couple of years ago, but his legacy is outshining. So what he did is he encouraged Joanne go and take part in a talent show, and that was held at the Regal Theater. And out of nothing, she took in the 2nd place behind the 5 stair steps. And being 15, 16 years old in a talent show and ending up at 2nd place, well, you really had to be good. So she entered the 5 stair steps. Both ended up with a record deal. She was managed by Spann and Robert Bob Lee. Well, Robert owned a small record label which was called Hawk Records, and he was an A&R for a very famous but short-lived record label, the Crash Records. Being 15, being 16, and having 7 brothers and not much income, Joanne was very happy to appear almost nightly at the club which was owned by Spann, and the club was called The Club. And it was former called Club de Lisa, and later on in the 70s it was the Burning Spear. So what happened next was she booked a recording session at the Universal Recording Corporation. And that studio is absolutely famed. And I don't know if she paid the studio time for herself, that is not known, but I found some footage from inside the studio, so you get a kind of impression. It is footage from, in my consideration, mid to late 80s, but you still have an impression of what kind of studio that is. Let's watch it.
This is Studio A, as Foot would say, the flagship of the Universal Empire. This is the ante room where the clients come and make their phone calls. This is the control room, sporting a Neve Vintage Series. This room is 32-track digital, 24-track analog, and a host of other peripheral gear which can be stacked up upon everything around. Over here we have the synclavier, sporting the new Mac 2 front end. Digital 2-track. As we see through the glass out here, one of the finest rooms in the city, home of many famous recordings featuring such artists as Duke Ellington, Weather Report, and Stan Kenton.
Oh, and Frank Sinatra too.
Frank Sinatra, and also we've had as many as 75 members of the Chicago Symphony here in symphonic fashion.
How did it obtain this beautiful brown color?
This has been here since 1958, at which point it was in vogue in those days.
Oh, don't forget the quad speakers.
Yeah, the quads are.
As this
of
is a
utmost
quad
importance.
board. You recall quad from the 70s?
At a time, we actually did mix a quad thing in here.
All four speakers?
We did. Had a guy, that's where that big pan pot in the back there comes from, that joystick.
Mm-hmm.
Quarter-inch patch fields.
You have selections on the, via the buttons you have selections for noise reduction not, two types, Dolby and DBX. And two tape machines. There's a 16 buses on the Neve, and you have your choice of two multi-track tape machines. After it gets up to 16, it repeats. 17 is 1 and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
It's swell.
Studio A. Lots of stands. Going on microphones. All set up and raring to go. It's organ.
The famous Drum Motel.
Drum
The
motel.
Hotel. Yeah.
Drummers go in, they don't come out. Did you point out the beautiful curtains, the screen, the projection windows? Those are projection windows. That used to be where the old control room was up there. Where the,
We also have Mammoth Cave in here.
the rock motif singer cave.
We used to use
Each
trees.
solder joint carefully put together. Carefully soldered. Lovely trees, Christmas trees. Swivel. Even swivel.
In 1966, Chess Records, who also had ties with Universal Recordings, they picked up that single and released it in spring of 1966. And they thought we're going to try out and see how that works, how the audience is reacting to her. She has absolutely potential. So let's see where this leads us. And the single became a locally hit. So then they said, okay, Joanne, you're now coming to our studio. You're working with our musicians. And we see how it goes from there. Let's make, once again, a break up here. Imagine yourself being 15, being 16. You live in totally poverty. You've been treated like not even second-class people. You grew up in slums. You've been, people are like, oh, you're white, you can upstairs. Oh, you're black, go downstairs in the basement. So this is where you've grown up. And now people see you have talent. You've been offered to record music in a professional recording studios. What are you going to do when you're 15 and 16? You can't afford, if you are been offered a contract, which wasn't in many cases happening. Some artists were offered, hey, you get a free meal if you come in the studio, or other ones saying, okay, I come for free just to have a chance of a better life. And once you got the contracts, in many cases, you got shitty contracts. You could have $1 million seller and not getting the money out of it because your contract was not been done in your favor. And you couldn't afford to go to a lawyer and say, could you please have a check through all this paper and see if this is in my interest, and fight them. And maybe you then get not a chance to record and have the possibility to reach something, to get something. No, it wasn't done that way back in those times. You were happy to have a chance. And sometimes, like I said, you came in to do it for free. You came in to get a proper meal or to get some groceries for your family. You've got a little payment which you were happy about, or you got a contract which was shitty. So that was most of the time your possibilities. You didn't even think about distribution or having the chance to go to a major label. Maybe the major label that had so many artists that weren't interested in you. Maybe. But Betty Harris is a great example. She recorded, and the distribution for that small label was selling the singles out of a car trunk. So it was the way it was. There was no YouTube to promote yourself. So these were the chances you were having, and you were grabbing them desperately to get out of poetry. And you've been made promises. Maybe the record engineer, your manager, or whoever said, hey, you're going to be a big star. You're going to be headlining the Apollo. You're going to be on television. You get your own show, whatever. You've been in the situation that you can offer this chance, and you've been made promises. Keep that in mind as we continue with Joanne's story. So in 1967, after her locally success with her first single, she came into the studio and recorded the songs You Can't Come In and I'm So Afraid. And this single, also like her next one, was backed up by the dance. Usually I'm not into 45s, but I'm So Afraid, when I heard that song, I needed to have the singer. It is just the B-side, but this song is so good. I wish they would have included that later on her album, but it's for me one of her best songs. And the good thing about this is the singers, usually those rare artists who haven't done so much or who are not so publicly known, those single prices are skyrocketing. With Joanne, that's not the case. You now still find her singles not so expensive. So my tip, I'm So Afraid. At least have a listen to it. It's a great, great song. But let's continue. Her next single was 1,000 Miles Away and Just Say When, which was done with Andre Williams, who helped producing her stuff, and that really, really helped her in her career. 1,000 Miles got so successful and got her so much reputation around Chicago and also outside of Chicago that she had the chance to do a tour. Unfortunately, there is no pictures, no information available at all about her doing this tour. But at least, once again, she had some income. Do was a label which was founded in 1968, and it was a sub-label of the label Summit. And on Do, Joanne also recorded some material. And I can only point out, can you deal with it? And we will be listening to the first couple of seconds of that track, and you're gonna love it. Once again, this is a promo copy of her single on Do, where I said she recorded some other songs. I found this is a promo for 15 euros from a German seller. So, like I said, if you have a chance to find some of her material on Chess or on Do, go and grab it. I won't recommend to you saying, oh, it's going to be a big, you're going to make a lot of money out of it, but use it as an investment. No, I love the music. Go and get it for the music. Let's have a listen to that track. Some other tracks I want to point out which were recorded and released on Do were One Woman and That Little Brown Letter. Later that time, Andre and Joanne released a single on Chess, and this was called The Same Time, Same Thing, Same Place, which kind of has a reference to Light My Fire. Releasing that on Chess meant that she didn't burn bridges with Chess. Usually back in those days, and also I think today this is going to be happening, if you're an artist and you kind of work for a label and you go to another label and record music up there, the label you started on is not really happy with it. But Chess was having not a problem with that. So if you have a chance, also listen to that single. I really, really like it. And once again, it's not super expensive to get. In 1969, Chess decided we need to do an album. The singles you did were all locally very successful, and maybe the album will help to get you in the main market. And that album is Just a Taste. And here it is in all of its glory. I get that out for you. So, Just a Taste. And from the beginning to the end, once again, this is a fantastic album. If you wanted it a couple of years ago, it was tremendously expensive, like tremendously expensive. Nowadays, when I looked up various versions on Discogs, you get it with a starting price of $100. Some versions, I saw one record which was, I think this version, which was sold for $100, and somebody's offering for $500. I don't really get that, the difference between that. But if you want an original, and this is actually your only chance to have that album because it has not been reissued in any form, it's been $100. But like I said, a couple of years ago, it was way more expensive. So Just a Taste. And I would say, let's finally have a listen to some tracks of that album. I don't hear from you.
Just can't get over losing you to face. I don't know, no, I just don't know.
You can find her music on YouTube. You can also find all of her singles on YouTube to get a better impression. And it also states on the back of that album that it has been recorded in October of 1969. Well, that album didn't do much. It has a killer version by Walk On By, which was inspired, to say the least, by Isaac Hayes' version. It has some fantastic version. It has a fantastic version of Unforgettable, and It's No Secret. Ain't No Way. Fantastic album, from the beginning to the end. If you hear it, you're gonna enjoy it. If you find it somewhere, go and grab it. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. But how does the story goes up? How does the story goes further for Joanne? Well, not very much. After the album been released, and I said it didn't do much, she kept on recording some more singles. The single to promote the album was Depend on Me and It's No Secret. Would have a different kind of single with a different song, maybe Walk On By, maybe some other songs would be more helpful. I doubt it. I don't know how much Chess invested in promoting everything. It's not known, but it, like I said, unfortunately, it didn't do much at that time. So what did she do? She went back to Do and released some more singles on Do. So in 1970, Do released a single which was called What You Been Doing and I'll Always Remember. I'll Always Remember was actually recorded in 1969 and also released in 1969. So maybe the A-side was a leftover. Also in 1970, she recorded a song which was called Going Manhunting for the Twin Night label, which is very famous for the recordings of Sly Johnson. This song wasn't released till 2008, where it turned up to be on a Twin Night compilation album. So what else happened? In 1971, she recorded a song with the group The Rock, and that one was called Don't Abuse Your Faithful Love. In 1972 are the last tracks of Joanne, where she released a single on the Duke label, which was called I'm Under Control, and the B-side was Sting Me Baby, where she also has co-writing credits on it. Joanne disappeared and was nowhere to be found. Journalists are trying to find her. Record label owners trying to find her. Like people like me are trying to find her, but she's nowhere to be found. Because, and I think that's the great thing also when I said some record owner labels are using her, for example, the song I mentioned earlier, Going Manhunting, well, there are some loyalties waiting for her. So Jen, wherever you are, I hope you live the life you dream of. I hope that you're still alive, and I want you to know that your music has been loved and cherished by many people around the globe, so you are not forgotten. If she decided, well, I tried enough, I had an album, people like me up here, but maybe it's not enough to have a mainstream career. Maybe that was her motives. Or maybe she said, oh, I'm done with that. It's just not my thing. I might be talented, but I'd rather grow up a family, or I'd rather do anything else than this. We don't know. Which is very unfortunate. I would have loved to hear how her voice matured more. And you can imagine being 15, 16, and she had a phrasing and that was unbelievable for her age. But that's how the things are going. And maybe she was disappointed. Like I said, we will never know. But you remember when I told you about the promises? Well, you've been highlighting the Apollo. You get your TV shows. You're going to be a famous singer. You will be touring. And these promises are made. You release a single. You release an album. And then you wait. You wait weeks. You wait months. You wait years. And nothing's happening. No Apollo, no TV show, no touring. Nothing. So you're just not disappointed yourself. You might think that you also disappointed your friends, your family, your mother, your father, your brother, your sisters, because, hey, they're going to the neighborhood and saying, hey, listen, my brother, my sister, my son, my daughter, they got a record contract and they're going to make it big. That's not happening. So being in this environment with gangs, with drug dealers, where all of this, the temptation to fight your disappointment is very big. So yes, the chances after being treated by some companies, by some managers, even if you had a million seller single and you're not getting a dime for it, or you got a free meal for it, well, that's very big to end up in depressions, abuse, addiction, and all of this. Because you've been built up with 15, 16, 17, 18 years, you've been built up, you've been made promises, and you were letting down very, very badly. And your dreams and all of this is crashed, next to the hopes your family might have had. So yes, this is, in most cases, the stories these singers are going through. And that's, for me, very important to do this episode, is to point out there where these artists, and they have this music, and it's getting more and more difficult to find affordable records, original records from them, or even reissues, like I said, with the Joanne one. It's not been reissued. But I think they deserve to be heard. And the music they did, the love they put in their art, how they created it, deserves to be heard and also deserves to be remembered. So yes, that's why this episode was a little different, because I wanted to point out how these people growed up, under what circumstances. And when you are on the bottom and you've been lifted up with promises which never been held and you're crashing down so badly, yes, this can happen. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, and listen to good music, maybe Joanne. I can only recommend her album, all her material, especially I'm So Afraid. I love this song. I'm waiting for the single to arrive any day. And also, Can You Deal With It? That's a tremendously great song. So go and get it and listen to her music. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.